All right, that's better. Let me know if at any point if I seem to cut out or if my voice or sound goes or something, because my internet's been a little bit funny. So if you can hear me okay, just give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep this kind of pretty basic as possible to not overwhelm anybody or anything with this. And I've got some notes to go through, and so keep looking down, just forgive me, because otherwise I'll just lose track. But what I wanted to start off with first and foremost is your plans that you've already got now. Maybe Sarah, you may be an exception with this. Is it because we've obviously lowered your calories a little bit for what you're doing currently, and you actually Kirsty as well. So we've still got an essence to play with to actually come back up to maintenance, because you two are quite far down maintenance at the minute. But with what you've got, we can, at the end of this, if you're not wanting to continue, I can send you out what we class as your maintenance calories, which you can then work from to decrease or increase. Obviously, if you wanted to come into a deficit cut or to go into a surplus to muscle building phase, which are both very gradual. So, we've been through this process of 12 weeks now where we've gradually taken things down. We've not done any drastic cutting, and it should always remain that way. So if you're wanting to achieve something as taking wherever you are at as a standpoint right now with the plans that you've got, if you are going to increase slightly again or decreasing more, we do this very, very slightly. So you will be able to do this yourself. I want to start off by saying on the top and bottom of it, you've got your protein, your fats, and your carbs. Protein, I want to say pretty much where it is. And it's for numerous reasons. If we have protein deficiency, basically it means that we've got a reduction in amino acid oxidation, and we aren't able to protein synthesize properly. And we need protein synthesis for all of our organs, basically, to be able to function properly and to repair. So we cannot be in a deficiency. The government guidelines that most people will, not even stick to, because let's face it, you actually eat properly without guidance. But the government guidelines protein intake for most people, like what NHS recommend, is actually too low. And it's for people that don't do very much at all, very, very sedentary people, which most of you are very much not, so you need more. The second thing with protein in terms of how much we get is, so we don't want to be in a deficiency. There's then an accommodation phase. So this is when we're just getting enough for the body to tick over, to do what it needs to do, which again, it's not functional, it's not stable, it's not healthy to be in that accommodation factor. We are still basically in a negative state for what we want most of you to continue to go on doing. And then we come to the third thing, which is adaptation, which is where all you need to be and all you are currently with your plans. So in adaptation, basically you've got a sufficient intake of protein now, and you'll get a decent amount of results. It's also helping them for optimal enzyme production and protein synthesis, plus your immune function. So we need enough protein there to be able to give us all that. The fourth thing to bear in mind is then excess. So I wouldn't recommend that you go anywhere over what you've got. Obviously, now and again, days if you have a barbecue and you might all out of meat, that's not a problem. But consistently going over, it isn't going to leave any health detriments. It's more just the fact that you've got more protein and amino acids floating around your blood that's actually needed. So it just basically then becomes a burden on your digestive system. So this is when we can get prolonged excessive bloating, when we feel like we're just always really sluggish because our body's not managed to break down protein. Because alongside that as well, for some people, we can have hydrochloric acid deficiency, which you won't know unless you've had testing and stuff for it. But basically, our body's get to a point as well where we don't produce enough hydrochloric acid to actually break down the food in the stomach. And then, depending on where it goes through in the digestive tract, there's various different enzymes that we need in that process to break them down too. So that's why people start taking digestive enzymes. But there's different strains that people need depending on what actually is the issue. Without testing, we don't know. So there's no point. I've not really said to anybody, take X, Y, and Z supplements, because it's like being in the air. What's the point? It's just a waste of money. So protein, we want to keep you always in an adaptation phase. So protein on your plan should always pretty much stay pretty static. Even when I change plan, it will come down naturally slightly, because that's including the foods like oats, which do have a bit of protein in them as well, and other carbohydrates. Again, the breads will have natural protein in them. But for the belt and braces of your meats and your eggs and even yogurts, like zero fat yogurts, which are predominantly protein sources, then they're the ones that we always keep in mind. We've got one decent source of protein in per meal. In terms of how that might look, if you were to kind of be, I don't know, caught off guard, or if you're out and about, or just unsure in terms of you're wanting to kind of redo your plan, is you want to think about then spreading the protein out across however many meals. So on the front page of your plan, you will have your protein, fats and carbs on that front page, and you're currently on what that plan consists of. So if you wanted to spread your meals out across the day, you've got your protein number, and you basically just divide that by how many meals. So for most people are on 4 meals a day. Ideally, for best muscle composition and body changes, it's better to spread food out from like 4 to 6 meals. I know some people have like 3 meals, which isn't always optimal, because it then just means you've got to kind of pack a lot of this food into 3 meals and hope that the body can actually digest it properly to make use of it. And this is why you'll see bodybuilders doing like at least 6 meals a day, because we can spread it out better for optimal muscle growth. But again, it comes down to digestion too. People that have poor digestion and they can't tolerate food very well, it makes sense to spread it out more, so they basically the capacity of the gut can start to break that properly and actually utilize what it's got there. So as a bit of a rule of thumb, having between, well, let's say around 30 grams of protein per meal, but that is based on having around 5 or 6 meals a day, is kind of like a good thing with like, I don't know if you're getting enough. So what it looks like in terms of hand size would be like palm of a hand. And you can find out stuff, some guides and stuff in the food group anyway, in terms of you being able to visually start to see that. So if you are out for meals, start to go for more lunches with friends, is you want to always make sure you've got sufficient protein source, palm of hand in your meal. You then probably want to make sure that the rest of that plate is filled. So like half of that plate is filled with green veggies, or like obviously some cool veg, and then the remaining quarter of it would probably then be your carbohydrate source, and then like maybe a thumbful of fats. So thumb, actually, like it should be able to sit on your thumb. So then when you are, based on if you're like 120 pounds to 150 pounds, then it's like a 30-gram protein per meal you'd have if you're like 5 to 6 meals. If you're between 150 to 200 pounds, it's going to then go up to 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal, based again on 5 or 6 meals, not 4 meals. So obviously, if you're having less meals, the protein source needs to go up in quantities. So then we come on to fats. So protein is your non-negotiable. Protein should be in every single meal, especially obviously where most people mess up is not having anything in their breakfast. But it's the best way to get it out today. But fats then we come on to are an essential nutrient as well. So these can vary and fluctuate more, but they are again still essential. So they are involved with our hormones, especially women, and also in regards to the fat-soluble vitamins, so vitamin A, D, E, and K that we need to function. So we have 3 different types that I mainly want you to focus on. So this will be your unsaturated, which is your animal fats, your eggs, things like coconut oil, and these are really good for your levels of cholesterol and hormone synthesis. So for your female body, for female cell to function, we do need saturated fats in them. Then we have monounsaturated, so your olive oils, avocados, nuts, and these are really good for having a good blood lipid profile. So having high amounts of HDLs and low amounts of LDLs in terms of a ratio split. And then finally, we've got our polyunsaturated, which is your fish oils, flax, and grease, so that side of things. And these are really, really good for decreasing inflammation, decreasing heart disease, and decreasing depression, and then an increase on fat loss and lipid profiles as well. So we do need to mix all 3 of these, and there's no really hard fast ratio. It's just making sure you can get that even spread through the day. So the way you've got your beef mince, you want to cook that in oil because that's already got some saturated fat already in it. Again, your saturated fat in the yolk. If you are cooking in extra virgin olive oil, then you then have your monounsaturated. And then when you've got salmon, again, you've got your polyunsaturated, as well as lactic and flaxseed. So again, you've got polyunsaturated there. It's telling me that my audio might be affected. So it all sound all right? I'm just going to tether 1 second. It might just cut off a second. Hotspot. Is that any better?
Yeah, it seems better. There's a little bit of a delay there, I think, on the line, but
I don't know what
there is at my end.
It seems to actually zoom on this computer instead of my laptop. It doesn't seem to like it very much.
It's just going a bit muffled again now. I think we can just about make it out, but I think they'll struggle when they watch the recording.
Right, 1 second then. What I'm going to do, I'm going to log out and I'm going to log back in on my laptop. 1 second.
Just cross, this sounds better. Yay! I'm blaming the computer, stupid. Right, so, is there anything that you want me to just recover that you didn't hear properly?
I think I'm good. So in summary, protein is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
hit them. If you have a meal where you miss them, find a way to sort of get them in, just split what you've missed across the course of the rest of the meals.
Yeah.
And we were just saying fats are essential, but it's okay to fluctuate with those a little bit.
Yeah, perfect. So the one that I would say to make sure you don't have is trans fat. So making sure where possible you do avoid trans fats. So this is generally anything that's a very soft or a liquid fat. So when you think about like margarine and stuff, that kind of crap. There's basically, it's just gone through a phase of adding hydrogen to it, which kind of makes it very much unstable, and the body doesn't process it very well. Okay, so you want to try and make these diverse. Donna, can you just put yourself on mute, please? I'm
sorry.
I'm hearing myself. I get distracted easy at best of times. And what ideally we want to have, and this goes for men and women, is that we want to stay in a state of having 20 to 30% of our calories coming from these diverse fats, basically. So what you'll see in most of your plans is that you've got generally at least 20 grams worth of fats in there naturally. And we'll talk through later in terms of changing these up, depending on what kind of phase that you want to go into, because if we increase the fats to we can go as high as 50 to 70, and this would obviously be more of your like keto kind of diet where your carbohydrates then come low, and then we can go on short pushes where we do really, really decrease the amount of fat to like 15%, but you would only ever do that for a very short space of time, generally more for like bodybuilding purposes that we generally, I personally love my fats. So, and what you want to imagine is like you've got your protein at the top as your non-negotiable, and then your carbs and your fat come between, and they basically go on a sliding scale. So the more carbs you have, the less fat you'd have. The more fats you have, the less carbs you'd have on that sliding scale. Basically, it'll just move along. So then we'll look at carbs. Carbs are technically not essential. However, so we have clear metabolic effects when we do have carbs. We can fuel high intensity exercises, and we actually need it to fuel HIIT. So when we see all these people that are doing like fasted HIIT workouts, that are living on a keto diet, and especially doing it fasted, it's just, for me, it's a no-go. There's no fuel in that whatsoever. You need it as well for your thyroid output. It's really fundamental for thyroid function. Also your levels of leptin in terms of the hunger hormones and ghrelin, and it allows you to actually hit your calorie target more easily. So let's face it, we all love carbs, and we'd probably have more if well, to be fair, we could probably get away with it, and we can talk about that in a minute. And we need it as well for an increased metabolic capacity. So if we're in a non-dieting phase, as in like being to like a heavy bodybuilder diet, which none of you are, then it does have a really good effect on the metabolism as well. So recapping, protein is set, and we want to get this mainly from our primary protein sources. So if you go through your diet plan, that horrible word, diet plan, your food plan, you can see your predominant massive protein sources on that. So they're the ones with the big first number. So they're worked out as your protein numbers first, your carbohydrate number is second, and your fat number is the third number along, and you'll see PCF at the top of each. So you'll see that some of the foods do have, and they do cross over into other food groups, but you'll be able to see the ones that have given you the main spike of that particular macro group that you're looking for. So in terms of being like moving forward, I know there's some stuff that I've put on the group in terms of where certain food groups do sit, and some of them do overlap one another. So take salmon, for example. It's very high in protein. It's also very high in fat. So you need to also then bear that in mind with the other fats that you might consume in that either that given meal or the foods in a given day. You know, I do have some people that will, like, say vegetarians, for example, that would only eat fish. They might not. I've got a couple of people that don't necessarily like a lot of white fish, and you're like, can't really just feed you salmon all day, and that's not going to work because you're not going to get a very good substantial source of any other kind of fat if you're only to eat that fat source. So yeah, we want to make sure they're nice and diverse across your different variants of meat and fish and egg establishments. Then your carbs are going to be very much regulated by your fat intake. So fat does take the primary over the carb source, but again, carbs are important to some extent in terms of the goals that we want to strive towards. So when we actually look at moving forward for a successful transformation, the main key is energy balance. So in terms if you are in a caloric deficit, so basically maintenance or under, how far under you are, and also ensuring you've got a sufficient protein intake. So those two factors alone are key. And then carbs and fats are person dependent. This is why you are on all different things, why you've not just got a copy and paste plan, because that doesn't work. So if we were to then look at how you might start to track this, so obviously you've got a plan now, and you can substitute foods in and out of that. You can increase certain foods on there if you wanted less meals. You can then decrease certain meals on there if you wanted to kind of split them in half. So obviously, I mean, like Kirsty, I know that you split some of yours in half to spread throughout the day because that's working good for you. So you can still do that. And then again, as you've split them, so say like if you were to have, say just for an example, if you were only having 3 meals a day and in most of your meals you're having to have 200 grams of chicken or 200 grams of fish or whatever, you could then cut that into, if you were finding that you were getting quite hungry between those meals and not being able to last, I would suggest cutting those into 5 to 6 meals and obviously just halving that protein source, so that then you've got something that's spreading across the day, because protein as well keeps us satisfied, it keeps hunger at bay, it helps us feel satiated. So when we come to then tracking of other ways that you'll be able to do this, so we can look at portion control through the hand measurement system, which again is in the group. I can't remember, it'd be under the nutrition section. And this is in terms of making sure that you have like a handful of carbs, like a palmful of protein, a thumbful of fats. This is really good for people that are complete beginners, which I wouldn't really class you as being like that now. It's good for use when you are out and about for, like I said, for meals with friends and stuff, and you wanted to gauge that you've definitely got a sufficient amount for that given meal and you're potentially not going too overboard. It's nice and simple, so it does offer simplicity, and it can be depended on, can be adjusted on your goals as well. So say like if you were in like a more surplus gaining phase, then you'd know that you probably need like 2 handfuls of carbs. And then if you're on like a low carb, then you'd probably go like, a very small palmful of carbs. So it can be kind of adjusted depending on, but I wouldn't necessarily suggest it as like a be all and end all suggestion moving forwards. Then you've got set plans, which I used to in the very beginning do set plans, but then that's when you're talking like when I started about nearly 10 years ago now. Set plans are what you used to do for people back then, because we didn't have the flexibility, and it was like, you eat this and this is what you must do. And that doesn't work. It can be good for beginners to actually understand and get into a level of kind of not complacency. What's the word? Oh, where's just gone? Compliance. That's what I'm thinking of. And it's also good for like people that do want the decision fatigue taken away from what exactly to eat. And I find for people starting off, it can be good so that you can see, exactly what it is that you need to get in every single day to actually start to move forward and learn from that and grow from that. It's not very good for using for people that don't necessarily compete, like general population. Basically, it's not good for a long-term solution for that, because it starts to then teach restriction, which is very much why I do more of a hybrid approach with mine. You can then take the approach of having a full flexible diet of, if it fits your macros. Now, I know that some people can do this, but again, depending on your level of nutrients that, you know, if you're going for nourishing food, then you'll pretty much be fine. Generally, you know, people find that quite satiating, but people can generally take the piss a little bit with a flexible diet. So if it fits your macros, it's a case of you can go online and go on any kind of macro calculator. They'll all pretty much end up being similar. But if it fits your macros, only works best if you're pretty well educated on what is in food macros wise, because you will have to track everything every single day to know exactly what you're eating. And I mean, I've been there, I've been through the whole MyFitnessPal thing. It's exhausting. And after a while, you just get goddamn fed up of it. It gets tedious. And people then learn to, you know, you give an inch and people then take a mile in terms of what they think they can kind of get away with it. And it can, again, lead to an unhealthy mindset with, you know, overly tracking, getting very reliant, getting very obsessive with it. It's not a very good way to move forward. So the next one is tracking, but having your calories and protein intake as the focus, which I think is something that could work well for those of you that obviously not continuing on with me, is that you can then have, and I can send this to you before we obviously finish off, but I can send you then like a maintenance calorie, a 10% deficit kind of calorie intake, and then let you know about your protein requirement for both as well. And then basically all you need to do is track your protein and make sure that you're doing enough of that, and then just make sure the rest of the food that you have basically sits within the calorie intake. And it doesn't matter then whether that's coming more from carbs or from fats. It gives you that flexibility to have more or less of what you fancy. Obviously on given days, you know, say like you might want to do most of the week sticking to the plan that you've already got and substituting things in and out, but then every now and again, like on a weekend, you might want to use more of just a calorie and protein focus, because you're going to be out and about all day. You're going to be here, there and everywhere, out shopping. You don't want to have to necessarily take your prepped meals with you in order to do that. So it gives you that option then to have, you know, things on the go more easily, to pick things up on, you know, a shop on the way when we can finally eat out. Yay. So that's an option. Now, the sheet that I've given you so far has more of a hybrid effect. So for a lot of you, you've got different options for different meals. So when I've stated a protein source, you've got different options of that protein source. When I've said a certain carb source, you've possibly got a couple of options of that carb source in a given meal. So you can then start to look at these, look at the number of carbs that's got attributed to it. And as you're then going through the supermarket, if you look at, say, generally you want to look at the label on the back that says per 100 grams and then says per serving. So obviously things like a tortilla wrap, a bagel, that's going to be 1 per serving. But other things might differ, like things like rice. Again, that is going to be dependent, because a serving for you isn't necessarily a serving for another person, which is it's just obviously generic food labeling. So there's ways that you can then look to find out. So if you take rice, for example, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, actually. I'm going to try and bring up some food labels on it because I've switched computers. So I'll just do it from MyFitnessPal and just kind of go through a couple of examples. So rice. And if we were to go for, so say like 100 grams of rice gives you 80 grams of carbohydrates. So basically you would then just need to work out like a rough idea. So you know that then about 50 grams of it is going to be about 40 grams of carbs. So you can kind of just like half it quickly in your mind. Obviously, if you did want to be quite accurate, and obviously the anal that I am with it, that obviously you get in your plans, but you can kind of get an idea then of basically looking at the back of something and be right, 100 grams equals X. I know that I need probably about half of that, or like just less than half. And you can then kind of gauge under or over, because most of you are going to be between like 40 to 60% of what the 100 grams of that label is. So it's pretty much easy enough to work out. You know, if you did want to do, obviously working out the percentage on the calculator, then go for it. But again, you can just go onto MyFitnessPal and find the nearest thing. Like I stick to most of the stuff that's got a green tick next to it on MyFitnessPal. So if you're ever unsure, have it on your phone if you are in the supermarket, or obviously if you know you're going to buy something, just take it home and quickly just do a quick MyFitnessPal calculation of it. Most of the stuff obviously is in your food plan already, so you can chop and change. But when you're fancying something a bit different, something that I've possibly not put in there, I think like, I don't know, crumpets or something like that, you'll be able to see roughly how many you can have for that grams of carbs. And things like little Scotch pancakes, they're quite good as a carb source. Thinking for you, Donna, as well, that'd be quite good. Thinking about this earlier as a post-workout, the little Scotch pancakes are quite good. I think they're about, I think you can have about 3 of them, and I think that is it about 25 grams of carbs. Oh no, it's 2, and I think it's 25 grams of carbs in them. And I think I worked that out on the Tesco's one. So obviously, Asda's, Lidl's, Morrison's are all going to be relatively similar in terms of what's in them. Just double check. So that's more your hybrid approach. So where you want to try and stick to your numbers and get to learn your numbers. Again, if you want to spread it out over more meals, you've got the option to, you've got the numbers on your front page anyway to divvy them up further if you want 5, 6 meals of them, or restrict it back to 2, 3 meals. So you've got a rough idea of what you're going to need every day. Lastly, I will touch on intuitive eating. Now, intuitive eating, there's 2 very big schools of thought, and I'm kind of sat in the middle a little bit with it. I think it's got its place with people that have massively lost track and have, severe binge eating disorders. It's what I do work on with the ladies that I have on my intensive course, to try and have them listen to their body more and eat to what their body feels they need without having to use scales, use portion sizes. It's, you eat to what you feel is necessary. Nothing's off limits, and it can be quite helpful to get behaviors back in check. However, for most people that are just overweight, this is when they are intuitively eating and it's clearly not doing anything for them. So this is why we sometimes need the intervention to have some kind of hybrid, flexible tracking approach to get people back on track, start to learn hunger cues, having these meals. And I don't dictate when you have your meals. It's a case of you fit them when fits your lifestyle. And I know that for some people they've said, between like when I have my usual, my breakfast and lunch, I'm starting to get a bit peckish, in between those. It's like, right, well, can we look at taking something out of your meal 1 or your meal 2? So say if you've got banana in your meal 1, just save that for midway in between so that you've got something to tide you over. Because the main thing is that if you're starting to feel hungry in between, that's when you're going to start snacking on stuff that isn't necessarily really needed. It's just a case of starting to space out the food that you do need. You are going to feel hungry. If you go into a calorie deficit, you are going to feel hungry eventually, and that's the thing. So you need to always remember it's that balance between what's my goal and then my hunger levels. What can I sustainably carry on doing before I actually need to start increasing again to start warding off that hunger signal. With that, on that topic, is that I would, if you are looking to carry on decreasing your calories to keep on getting results, I would only ever do that for when you start to feel like you're falling off the wagon and you feel like you cannot continue sticking to it. You need to come and bring your calories back up, because going down and down and down, your compliance is going to get worse and worse and worse, and the results that you're going to get are not going to get you where you want to be. So generally what I would do is, and I've actually done it, well, actually with Chloe, we had a diet break this weekend. So I just said, don't stick to your plan. Go and have whatever you fancy this weekend, and then get back to it, obviously, from today. This can differ person to person. We've done that now just because of where Chloe's at. Chloe's at different points with other people. And I would never generally go probably like 16 to 20 weeks on any kind of deficit is generally your max. Because most people cannot sustain being compliant on a deficit any longer than 20 weeks. And that's because across the board, whether you are a general population or if you're a bodybuilder, it gets tough when you are down, and especially if you're dropping calories every couple of weeks, well, it gets really, really tough. So just bear that in mind. So onto that topic of going higher or lower, what we want to bear in mind is When it comes to looking to decrease your macros in order to keep sustaining or keep losing on your goal, you want to look to really drop a maximum of 200 calories on like a given week. So say like for this week, like, right, I want to take it up a notch. I'm going to drop 200 calories. This is going to come from carbohydrates, okay? And what you want to think of is that if you were to, I mean, to be fair, for most people, I wouldn't go as high as 200. I'd generally stick between 1 to 200, depending on how much that person's got to lose. If you've got less to lose, I'd go maybe 100 calories for that week. And I would do that for a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks. See where you're at. You might even need 4 weeks at that before dropping it then again. Because if you just keep dropping 100 calories every single week, you're just going to end up back in the starting position where you're at when you came onto this in the first place. So how do we do that? What we want to look at is that 100, so if we were basing it on cutting 100 calories from your diet in that week, 100 calories of carbs is about 25 grams worth of carbohydrates. So this would be something like, you know, a full Warburton's thin that you'd take out. It'd be it'd be half of a bagel. It'd be maybe like just under half of a full tortilla wrap. Or if you're on small tortilla wraps, take out 1 tortilla wrap. It isn't a lot. It'd be like taking out a Rice Krispie square bar. So it'd just be that thing, just that one thing. That's all you would need to do, and continue with that for like 1 to 2 weeks. See where you're at. If you can then feel like if you're dropping consistently, stick with it. If you feel at that point 2 to 3 weeks in that your weight still isn't shifting, then you can look at taking maybe another 100 calories out. But basically, if what you're doing is sustaining, and I'll give you an example of this actually. Helen's not on the call. I hope she won't mind me saying, but we haven't changed Helen's diet plan until this week just passed. So last weekend, not the one that's gone, the one before that, is the first time that I've altered her plan. She has consistently dropped week on week on week in terms of her results, her metrics, every single week without needing to change a bloody thing. So if it's working, don't change it. Basically, it's so unnecessary. People drop too much too soon, and this is where we end up in this like plummeted place where we're just back on the binge yo-yo cycle. It's not necessary. And then the same thing would happen when you say you either get to your goal weight, or if you can feel your compliance to that plan slipping, is increase it again by the same amount coming back up. So, 100 to 200 calories that first time. See, obviously, as your weight comes up, the thing is, a lot of people do find that when you actually increase it on a more controlled way up, the weight doesn't always come shooting up with it. You actually find that for a lot of people, they can generally either maintain, or some people actually drop even more, because they find when they've got more energy from the food that they've actually got, they actually train harder, they're moving around more. The thing that we need to be aware of is that when you are decreasing your calories, is that the body gets more slower. It's going to want to be like, it's not going to be one energetic. It's not going to be wanting you to do much like through the house on a given day. Everything's going to slow down internally for your body as well. So it knows that it's on a calorie deficit, and it's going to make all your internal processes slower as well. So you don't burn as much naturally, because everything internally slows down with it as well. So for a lot of people, on an increase of like 100 to 200 calories, obviously per increase, is that they actually generally find that their weight drops a little bit to start, because like body's like, whoa, energy. And you train harder, you have really good sessions, you train with more intensity, and then eventually it might start creeping up. And then what we generally tend to do is, when things start to plateau out, when you don't seem to see any more weight increases, then you can start to increase it a little bit more and have another couple of weeks plateauing out. Because what you don't want to do is, keep having an increase in the food more and more and more, and your body doesn't catch up, and your body actually increases in weight with it. So we've got to keep it nice and steady and controlled on the way back up. So summary with that, don't come down or go up any more than 100 to 200 calories at a time. Let your body settle. So whether it's if you're going to decrease, make sure that your body's actually plateauing for at least 2 weeks in a row before you decrease again, because especially as women, hormonally, things will impact that as well. So it could just be it lands at the wrong time of the month when you naturally increase anyway because of your hormones. So we can't judge it just on a single week alone. So if you have 2 weeks consistently where things aren't moving, then look to either drop or increase again, depending on obviously where you're actually wanting to go into a deficit or coming back out of a deficit. We can then look at, we're not too far off the end, we're nearly done, training and non-training days. Now, I know that some of you do have this in your plans, but this can be altered even more. So if you wanted, you can actually add more calories into your training day. Again, this would mainly come from carbs because your protein, your fat is pretty much all right as it is. If you know that you're training more intensely, you can add, again, maybe a couple hundred calories more to your training days, and then take away some carbohydrates from your non-training days because you do not need them on non-training days. But you can also use that approach as well if you wanted to do that. So it's an alternative to obviously dropping calories across the whole week. So if you know that you definitely train 5 days a week, you're like, right, I'm going to stick in an extra bagel on each meal for my training days, and I'm going to take out, so like, well, you won't have a crispy square bar on your non-training days anyway, but you might want to take out a Warburton's thin, maybe like 20 grams worth of rice or something like that on your non-training day. So you've then got the option. But if you're happy to just keep steady away and static through the week, if that makes it easier, then do that. Because obviously once you start getting into training versus non-training days, it can start to become a little bit complicated and not too sure. So then lastly, if you are ever out and about and you want something, and if you do want to try and track it, if you're out for a meal, the best advice, and not to completely scare the shit out of you, but if you've got a rough idea of what that food is, whether that's like let's use a donut for example, and you know that donut is roughly around like 100 grams if you were to weigh it, can go similar go off eye, and generally if you're buying some in the shop, they'll generally have like a rough guide of how much it roughly weighs. Basically times that amount of grams by 9, and that will give you a rough idea of calories. If you've got 100-gram donut, and I know that obviously this is not the truth, but it kind of gives you some essence of scale to go off, to not go off the wall, is that times that by 900 calories. Now, donuts aren't 900 calories, but there are some desserts out there that would be near that, and you wouldn't know. Some milkshakes that you can get that you wouldn't know, they can be well over 1,000, 2,000 calories in some of them. So if you can times it by 9, and we times it by 9 because that is the maximum that macro calculation can be, because 9 calories of fat is 1 gram of food. So, when we look at carbs and proteins, it's 4 calories per gram. Fats are 9 calories per gram. So if we round it up to that, we know that we can kind of get a good range of, we know that we've definitely not gone over that at least. So yeah, in a nutshell, I want to try and keep it as plain and simple as possible, just so that it obviously makes it a little bit easier when continuing on. Does anybody have any specific questions that they want to go through on here now? I see Donna reaching. You're on mute.
You've actually answered all mine.
Oh,
yeah.
That's good. Is that all quite clear though in terms of moving forward then? Does it make sense in terms of what you want to do, Donna?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, obviously I'm gonna keep the group going in terms of the WhatsApp group as well. So if you do want to keep putting anything in there, obviously don't take the piss, but I'll still happily, calculations wise, if you're not sure about the back of a food label, I'll quickly say like yes, no, this, that, or the other. I don't mind, I'll happily do that, just that people are, they can kind of get that education by looking at the labels themselves, getting a rough idea, and they just want to sound check it. I'm like, I'll totally do that, it's not a problem.
Well,
Anyone else have questions?
I've started tracking mine in the Fitness Pal already. So is that sort
Yeah.
of like a good way to go forward then?
Yeah, what I would say is with MyFitnessPal is do not have your calculations worked out in there in terms of what your body needs, because it's massively inaccurate. It
Yeah.
will. I think if I put what I want to do with my body in there, it tells me I should be on about 1,500 calories, which is absolute BS because I shouldn't.
Yeah.
I would be dieting on that, like dieting hard on that. So it's really not the accurate way to do it. I would always generally go off your macros, and I know that MyFitnessPal makes you pay for that element in terms of obviously splitting
I
it.
do.
into
I have paid for a year just before I started with you. So it's allowed me to put your macros in.
Yeah.
So what you give me, I've been able to put in, and it comes up and it's there anyway.
Oh, wicked. Yeah, well, perfect. Do that then, Donna. Yeah, that worked out really nice. And then it gives you that complete flexibility. You know, if there's some days that you're slightly under, some days that you're slightly over, don't worry about it too much. But as long as you're there or thereabouts, especially with your protein, you can't go far wrong.
Yeah.
Lovely. Sarah, you all right? You've come off mute.
Yeah, I'm just looking at these. Deli Kitchen.
Oh,
I just saw them in Sainsbury's.
what's
I don't know if you can put Sainsbury's, but just like a homemade pizza.
what are they like on the back there?
Per bread.
Yeah.
These can't do without my glasses on. 204 calories. 3.4 grams of fat.
Yeah.
31.7 grams of carbohydrates.
Oh, they're not bad then.
Yeah, 5.4 fiber and 9.9 grams of fat, 9 grams of protein.
That's not bad. Yes, they'd work out similar to like having a tortilla wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely having something like that in there. Again, it gives you that variety because it kind of look like a bit like a Greek flatbread.
Yeah,
Kind of
just
thing.
like a Greek. I can't speak. A Greek flatbread.
Yeah.
They're quite small, but I mean, if you like, if I really fancy like something like on a Saturday night, like a pizza. I mean, I really wouldn't ever order a takeaway pizza anyway. But
Yeah.
if I just really fancied like something like that, then
Yeah, use that as a pizza base. Yeah.
just have that instead of like one of my meals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
and then you can just use that as your base. Obviously, put your tomato and stuff on top, and just pile your meats on and things on top. And you can even have like a decent sprinkle and cheese on top of that, and that's a decent meal. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. I'm glad I got on then.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing because there's so many different options that you can find now with things like that, and you know, for most part, they've been a lot more mindful with making sure that the nourishing content of it is there rather than it being like completely crap. So, it's finding things like that and adding in things like I mentioned that with crumpets and Scotch pancakes. There's no reason why you can't have things like that and have waffles and things like that as well. It's just being mindful of what's in it and what do I need maybe to like reduce a little bit in another meal perhaps to make sure that this stays within whatever my goal is. Obviously, some days, it's fine to go slightly over what that is. I mean, you're all pretty much set in a deficit right now anyway. You're not like Sarah, actually, you're probably in a less deficit than everybody else at the minute in terms of obviously who's on this call. But it kind of gives you an idea then of, well, I know that I can start to introduce certain foods to start bringing me back up again, to get back to that maintenance and do it very steadily. So for you, I'd probably say, about 150 calories for 2 weeks, see where you're at, and then increase by another 150 calories. And, what easiest thing to do that with is literally using things like your carb sources of being like, all right, I'm going to add in a muffin, add your muffin back in for your breakfast. And that's all that you need to do for that particular week, for maybe 2 weeks, and see where you're at. And then add in, instead of my banana for like, I don't know, pre-workout, I'm going to add in a bagel instead of that and increase it that way. So it's just knowing what's in what to then keep gradually switching it up again. That makes sense.
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. Lovely. Kirsty, Chloe, are you both okay?
Yeah, all good. I just was really interested to know, hopefully my weight continues to come down because that's my goal, that I'm in control. So if my
Yeah.
scales stop moving for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
I'm looking to take out 200 calories from a carb source.
Yeah.
And
you-
then
because I
if I
think
get
I'd
movement.
probably stick actually with 100 for you at the minute, just
Yeah.
because you're in decent deficit already.
Cool.
So it should only need a small decrease to kind of kickstart that again, rather than slamming them out too soon and then plateauing out and you've got nowhere else to go. Because obviously when you get too low, you kind of get to that point where, like, the easiest way to work it out actually is if you were to know your body weight in pounds,
Yeah.
times that by 10, that's
Yeah.
the calories, the lowest that I would generally go for each of you.
Okay.
So
Great.
once you start getting to that amount of calories, like, that's when you know you need to either stop or start reversing back up again, because
Yeah.
your body's not going to like going any further. That's when compliance will start getting really bad. You're going to feel
Yeah.
really lethargic with stuff. So
Really?
your body weight in pounds times by 10, that's your calories, bottom calories that go to.
Brilliant. Thank you.
No worries. Chloe, are you okay?
Yeah, this has been really interesting. Thank you.
Oh, no worries.
I feel like it's what I've been missing.
Cool. No,
That's
I'm really,
everything.
really glad. And like I say, we've still got another, obviously, 2 weeks left. You've still got another 2 check-ins left yet. So if any more questions do come up along the way, just start thinking now. Like, if you do see certain things in the supermarket and you think, right, how do I introduce this? Just start taking pictures and just start sending me stuff over, and we'll start working out so that you've got that flexibility at the other end as well. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Thank you.
See
Thank you
you
so much for coming. All right.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Bye.
So,